Anyway, I want to welcome everybody to our second program of the Bristol Holocaust and Genocide Center. We added genocide, so I'm still programming it in my brain. Glad to see folks to come here. Thank you for coming in the nice afternoon. Nice little breeze. I think we're starting to finally get into spring. Before we begin, I wanted to first of all present our president, Laura Douglas, who wants to say a few words. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ron, and welcome everyone to our wonderful Bristol Community College, and welcome, Carolyn. We're so thrilled that you could come out and be with us today. I came in and I thought there might be a piano, so I'm a little bit intrigued, but I'm sure you're going to use technology to play some music, right? Perfect. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we are very fortunate here at Bristol Community College to have a Holocaust and Genocide Center, which explores the lives of victims and perpetrators and rescuers and bystanders of the Holocaust and, as Ron mentioned, other genocides as well. Annually, the Holocaust and Genocide Center sponsors speakers and workshops and conferences and has a plethora of materials available for students and community members to borrow, which we think is truly wonderful here in our corner of southeastern Massachusetts. In light of the recent vandalism that we've had here at our Jewish cemetery, that awful act of hatred, I think our center and our programming becomes even more important and more powerful. And not only to us as members of the Bristol Community College community, but also members of our wider community and our students. And it really behooves us all as educators and community members to do our part in crushing hatred. If you have not supported the Holocaust Center in the past and are thinking now that it's time to do so, I'm sure that Ron will be very happy to show you some ways in which you can provide further support. So we are very thrilled to have Carolyn Enger here today. She is a noted pianist and speaker who brings a very special program to us today, one that she has provided not only to Massachusetts, but so many other places in our nation and also across the world. So we're especially thrilled that she's here to bring the program to Bristol Community College. So thank you, Carolyn, for being with us, and we so appreciate your dedication to this topic, and we look forward to hearing more about your program today. Thank you.
Thank you, President Douglas. We're fortunate to have the support of the college, as well as people from the community. I wanted to, as usual, I'd like to just thank a few people, particularly Gary Brown and Judy Brown, who's downstairs, who been volunteering and helping us. We have a very small staff at the moment, but we get things done. Also, always thanking the Jewish Federation of New Bedford and Holocaust Education Committee, and Cindy Oken and Maria Reed up there, who are the co-chairs, who have been at this work for many years, right? And our Holocaust Center kind of emerged out of that work. Also emerged out of the course. We have Dr. Howard Timberg, who's up there, and myself have been teaching for, this is our 16th year, amazing. And our students are here scattered throughout. Our course is called, it's an honors course, it's called Remembering the Holocaust in Literature and History. And it's very important. It's been an important course for students to get an in-depth view of the Holocaust. So I want to introduce Carolyn Enger. She has performed recitals throughout the country, actually as a concert pianist, right? And but she's also developed this important Micheline project, which weaves, as you'll see, kind of a multimedia tapestry around the subject, which is not as well known probably as it should be, but you all will know more than a lot of people at the end of this talk on who are the Mishlings. Other than Manya up there, who's what? Manya and I teach a course too in the second. We have some people here from the second half here, which is a wonderful program for retirees. Manya and I have been teaching courses related to the Holocaust. Anyway, what Carolyn is doing is telling this story, which she's done, I think, throughout the country and the world, right? Which about the segment of the population that was persecuted by the Nazis, and which, well, anyway, we'll find out what their fate was, you know. So anyway, here's Carolyn.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I very much appreciate your warm welcome. I will tell you a little bit about myself and some of my family history, and then I think that this film will speak for itself, I hope. And afterwards, I would love to hear your questions. I've been reading and pursuing this topic for over 20 years. I feel the importance of speaking out about diversity, tolerance, and identity is especially needed now, and that I can use music as a vehicle for spreading a message of social justice. We can make a difference as individuals and accept people who are different from us with compassion and empathy. My family history is weaved in with stories of important cultural figures who share parts of this history. My grandmother, you'll see her, a photograph of her, she has a beautiful big hat on, Charlotte Popelauer, converted from Judaism to Christianity after marrying my grandfather. She passed away before the war, and my father was about 7 years old. I'm going to sort of skip around a little bit with this. On January 20th, as many of you know, 1942, in Wannsee, Germany, a conference was held to work out the plans for the destruction of the Jewish people. Among the things that were discussed at the conference was who was to be considered a Jew and where and how the Jews were to be annihilated. I was just there 2 weeks ago. I had some performances in Germany and had a chance to visit the Wannsee Conference House, and took a lot of pictures of the documents, of the transcripts of that meeting, and found particular documents that were completely related to the Mishlinge. You'll see in the film that there was sort of they're trying to make some kind of mathematical formulas of who was a Jew and who wasn't, because people were intermarrying. Jews were intermarrying at the end of the 19th century and into the beginning of the 20th century in Germany quite a bit, and assimilating. My grandmother, obviously one of them. And so one of the pieces of the documents at the Wannsee conference said that if two Mishlinge grade A, which will get explained, married each other, that then their child would be Jewish. And it's just, I mean, we can't really make sense of these things, but they really had a problem on their hands because of these sort of like partial Jews and what that meant to their racial science, so-called. My father was born in 1921, and so initially he was drafted into the Army. You had said that you have books that you're reading about the Holocaust. I wonder if you know Hitler's Jewish Soldiers by Brian Mark Rigg. There were many Mishlinge that were actually in the Wehrmacht, and their higher-ups didn't really know what to do with them, because at some point the Nazi officials had said no more Mishlinge in the army. But if somebody was a good soldier, the captain would keep the good soldier. And as a matter of fact, the photo of the kind of poster boy for the Wehrmacht was actually a Mishlinge. So, you know, I mean, you have to remember that Hitler was able to Aryanize someone with the sign of a pen. So it's all kind of very dubious in terms of racial categories. So initially he was in the army, and then he was kicked out. And what was he to do walking around neighborhood and with his neighbors, he faked a limp so that it seemed as if he had been injured on the front, because he was, a young guy. What's he doing at home? And rather than being in the army, it would have been suspect. He worked as an apprentice in textile and commercial art and worked on blueprints during the war. So you'll see some of his artwork. In August of 1944, he was put into a forced labor camp specifically for Mischlinge. He was digging ditches to fortify against the Russian tanks, and he laughs about it because when the Russian tanks came, they drove right over these ditches. They were completely meaningless. And the guards left. They fled when they heard these tanks coming, and so then the prisoners were able to follow their example. You'll hear him speak a little bit about that. He made his way down to Augsburg, where he had a commercial art business between the time post-war and the time that he immigrated to the United States. So with his commercial art business, Augsburg being in southern Germany, it's a very Catholic area, he had been commissioned to do a booklet with drawings of the 12 Stations of the Cross. So you'll see a charcoal drawing of Mary, it turns out, that's called Lied. I had no idea that that's what this drawing was. I grew up with this charcoal drawing next to my piano, and I thought this had been some kind of outpouring of emotion from my father of his experiences, and my Chopin nocturnes were sadder, just somehow inspired by this artwork and this connection that I had made in my mind. And it turns out that it was a close-up for the series of drawings, and that it was a commercial enterprise. It wasn't anything to do with his feelings look, he was a talented artist, but he wasn't sitting around wondering how to draw these emotions. So in 1947, he immigrated with his first wife, Ursula, my older sister's mother. The United Church World Services sponsored them because the Jewish agencies really had their hands full, and the Christian agencies were sort of like, well, but you're Jewish, kind of. So the Mischlinge really I would say their psychological profile is just to always want to be under the radar there, because they're kind of like neither this nor that, and they're not claimed by a group. Among Orthodox Jews, my father would be considered Jewish. His mother was Jewish, but he didn't identify himself Jewishly. So it's just kind of a little confusing, I would say. So we're going to fast forward to me. I was baptized by my godparents. You'll meet my godmother at the beginning of the film, who were German Jews, but somehow or another found themselves in the Protestant church because my godmother really liked the music. So you see, they're not really strong religious convictions here, not really faith choices, but more kind of personal choices. I don't know. So it's kind of, when my father returned from Germany after being, his father stayed there post-war, and when he passed away, my father came back with a big notebook filled with documents, and all the documents had these Nazi insignia stamped all over them. You'll see many of them in the film. And I was in high school. I was looking through these things, and I couldn't understand how these documents related to my family. And it was kind of understood that we didn't ask a lot of questions. My father was one of the survivors who didn't talk about his experiences. My godmother never stopped talking about her experiences. It's kind of common that it's usually one or the other among survivors. So I was raised as a Christian. I was going to Methodist church. I went to Sunday school. While I was in Sunday school, we were learning about Easter, and I probably told the biggest lie of my life. The teacher was describing Passover and the exodus of the Jews from Egypt, and I said, at home we also bake matzah. on rocks and, make it ourselves. And the teacher was so astonished, and my mother came to pick me up and was like so curious about what are we doing at home with the matzah, and of course I got in trouble. And when I tell this to my friends, they'll say, well, it was your Jewish neshama, which for those of you who don't understand, that's like a little bit of my Jewish soul somehow. I don't know how these things can be measured, but so this notebook with the documents, it raised my curiosity, and it also felt scary because these symbols are really pack a punch. As we know today with the vandalism, they're bone chilling. So I'm going to fast forward a bit. I was at Vassar College studying piano, and I didn't like the piano teacher that was assigned to me. And at the same time, the piano teacher that I'd had during high school landed a position at a college out on Long Island, Molloy College. No one's heard of it, okay? It was known as a Catholic nursing school. I transferred to Molloy so that I could stay with my piano teacher, and turns out that 9 credits of theology are part of the core requirement. One of the courses that I took was Intro to Judaism. And from that point on, I identified myself Jewishly. So Catholic college, and I then ended up starting to going to services and on Friday nights, and going to Seder at the rabbi's house. So I was part of a Reform congregation for over 20 years and went through a Reform conversion. Now, the rabbi said, well, you don't really have to, but whenever anyone would ask me, well, what are you? This is the explanation that they would get. So who has time, right? So I wanted a one-word answer. So I went through a Reform conversion, and then years later, someone said to me, well, but you're not really Jewish. So for those who don't understand that comment, there are 3 streams of Judaism. There are Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, and there are agreements and disagreements about a lot of different aspects of identity and life cycle events. So I then I never wanted to hear that again in my life, because I felt that I owned this identity. After all, my father had suffered. Children of survivors suffer in sort of a myriad of other ways that are not necessarily so obvious. There are studies done about inherited PTSD and, anxiety, depression. I mean, after Pittsburgh, I know that we were all nervous, but I really couldn't stand in one place for more than a second. I just, so anyway, we learned to live with things. So I went through an Orthodox conversion so that I could still have that one-word answer. And then if I had wanted to be buried in Israel or married in Israel, I could then do so, because the chief rabbinate in Israel has the, I guess, the sway over who's Jewish and who isn't. So it's interesting, because after my Orthodox conversion, I thought, well, do I feel any differently? And so people will ask me, so how do you feel now? And, my Jewish identity is firmly in place. I'm now married to a practicing Jew. And so, we observe the Sabbath and keep a kosher home. It's kind of easy for me. I'm a vegetarian, so it's not a lot to do. But I think it's kind of an interesting vantage point to have a little bit of an outsider's point of view, and see, what things make sense, which things make sense, and which things don't. So I don't agree with the chief rabbinate that only an Orthodox conversion makes a Jew. I think that anyone who says, I'm Jewish, is Jewish. I would say that, Rabbi Akiva had it right, that if you're identifying yourself that way, then go and study. So with this project, I hope to convey a positive message, empowering people with pride and confidence without shame or pressure to hide, acceptance both internal and external. Ultimately, I hope that it's about peace between us. So I think we can start the film. Thank you.
Can you define the word Mischling?
A Mischling, Mischling is a mixling. It's a German word for a mixling. You are of mixed race, but it's evenly distributed between two grandparents being Jewish and two grandparents being Aryans. So that was the denomination that they gave us. Half Aryans, half Jews. It was a term that was interchangeable, because since Hitler was not interested in the religion of the people, but he considered the Jews an undesirable race. And as far as he was concerned, everybody who descended from Jews, even partially, was undesirable and was not expected to pass on any Jewish blood. Questionnaires were always asking, what's the religion of your grandparents? It never said, what's your religion? That was unimportant. What's the religion of your grandparents? And that automatically branded you as a half-Jew if you said two are Jewish. What was interesting about that family and about a lot of other families in Germany in those days was that the generation of my grandfather were very much assimilated to being German first and Jewish second.
A lot of people, when they talk about the Holocaust, they talk about the Auschwitz, they talk about the concentration camp, they talk about the gas chambers, they talk about mistreatment of Jews, and so forth. But when you tell them about the story of the Mischlinge, they pop out their eyes and they don't know what we have in mind. But this is, Mischlinge is something that bedeviled the Nazis themselves. They didn't even they didn't know how to handle that. But they thought it was of the greatest importance for them to solve the problem of Mischlinge. So what's the word Mischlinge? It's a German word. It's no longer used. It's no longer employed. If you check a German dictionary today, I doubt whether you'll find the word itself. It's a Nazi word, which implies people who are mixed half-breeds. They're not this and they're not that. Now, what do I mean by that? The Nazis divided the human races genetically by blood, based on racial theories which were common in those days. And the other thing that the Nazis did, they intertwined this racial thinking with this demonic anti-Semitism that was already there, that saw the Jews as being not only that they are stubborn and they don't want to mix actually, or they don't want to convert to the mainstream religion, but they are conniving and they're basically evil. There's something evil about the Jews, but since they are few and since they know that there's something wrong with them, then they're making all the kinds of efforts to get over that by controlling the superior races. The conspiracies, like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Okay? The Jews want to dominate the world. How do they do that? Several ways. One way is by getting their hands on the financial markets of the world, by controlling the money. Number two is by causing the nations of the world to go to war with each other, and by financing these wars, because without money you cannot go to war. And number three is, since their blood is contaminated, is bad, then they try to marry with Aryans in order, it's like a medicine, it's like an injection, in order to better their blood contents. And that is dangerous because that causes a bastardization. That's the term that they use, a bastardization of their offspring. So what we have to do, they said, the Nazis, is first of all, we have to remove the Jews from our midst, if we can, and prevent the Jews from having any kind of sexual relations with Aryans, okay? From Jews from contaminating the pure Aryan blood. So they went one step of the Nuremberg laws of 1935, which forbade marriage between Jews and non-Jews, and forbade Jews from having sexual relations with members of the Aryan race. The Aryans are the Germans, the Scandinavians, and the Dutch. They were considered as part of the Aryan family. All right, so they were satisfied with this, but then they realized they got a bigger problem on their hand, because before Hitler came to power, there was a lot of assimilation in Germany. And thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews had intermarried with non-Jews. Some of them intermarried and they remained Jews. Some of them intermarried and they converted out. So there were tens of thousands of Jews who had converted. They've been baptized and they're going to church. Some of them were ministers, but they were born Jewish. So the Nazis, this was no problem to them. They decided anyone who was born Jewish, as far as we're concerned, he's a Jew. We don't care if he practices any other religion. We don't care if he's a priest or that. He's a Jew and he can practice any kind of religion. How do we define a Jew? And the answer was, but anyone, we were going by their grandparents. Anyone who had 4 Jewish known grandparents, whether religious practicing or not, whether they were registered with the Jewish community or not, but they were known. Anyone who has 4 known Jewish grandparents is a Jew, period. Then they took it a step further. Anyone who has 3 known Jewish grandparents, 3, that too is a Jew, period. Nothing can be done about it. The big problem was, if a person has 2 Jewish grandparents and 2 Aryan grandparents, or if a person has 1 Jewish grandparents but 3 Aryan grandparents, then this is what they did. A person who has 2 and 2, he is a Mishling grade A. Grade A, he's 50-50. A person who has 3 Aryan grandparents and 1 Jewish grandparent, he's a Mishling grade B. Now, most of these Mishling people were not practicing Jews. Some of them didn't even know that they had Jewish blood in them, especially someone who had 1 Jewish grandparent and 3 non-Jewish grandparents. He may have been baptized in the church. He may not even have known that he has that one of his grandparents was Jewish.
We are on the list, you know. Maybe 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. Our day was coming.
Right.
That's 100%. It was a law.
These laws were passed gradually. They were passed for the Jews in 1933. For the Mishling, they appeared in 1940. At that time, the half-Jews, the Mishlinger, had been drafted into the army when the war had started in 1939. And my brother, who was there together with a friend from Breslau, who was a non-Aryan, not a half-Aryan, but a non-Aryan. So he fled over the Pyrenees to Spain, and from Spain he went to England and saved his life this way. My brother did not dare do that. He wanted to. But since he thought and he knew that he was supposed to go into the army, he was afraid that Hitler or the Nazis would take it out on his family if he, as a German potential soldier, is fleeing into another country and is not coming back. So he came back. And they had just passed another law. If there was a new law, they didn't want them anymore. So they sent them back, and they did not draft any new ones. But it was a slow degradation of the lifestyle. It was going from worse to worse.
Her brother had contracted tuberculosis in an internment camp in France and recovered well in a sanatorium in Germany. He was on his way to a summer hotel job near the Swiss border, but he disappeared en route. They reported him missing.
The trains were regularly raided by the military and the Gestapo. So one of the two, I'm not sure which, probably the Gestapo, saw his military pass that he had, which identified him as a half-Jew. He was a tall, blonde guy and stuck out in those days in 1943, like you saw a thumb, not being in uniform and fighting for his fatherland. So somebody didn't like that, took him out of the train.
He was passed from Gestapo prison to Gestapo prison until they anonymously received a phone call that he was in Breslau. Each of them, including her non-Aryan mother, went to the prison to petition for his release. Finally, one officer told Rosemary that if she came back the next week, he might have some information.
And then he looked in his files and he said, "Your brother has been shipped to Auschwitz." So I immediately got in touch with my parents, and my father got on the train to go to Auschwitz and rescue his son. Well, he never got to Auschwitz, of course. I mean, they didn't allow tourists or regular persons to get there. So he came back, and then we got a letter from my brother. He was allowed to write. We have 2 letters from Auschwitz. And in the last one that was dated the 4th of July, he did not write the letter himself. It was written in some other's handwriting, but he signed it. And it said, the news about John or some other name about his TB breaking out again is very sad, and I hope that he will recover. And we, of course, knew that he was talking about himself. And then several weeks later, my father was ordered to the Gestapo in Breslau and was handed a death certificate that was dated the 8th of July. So he died on the 8th of July, supposedly.
While we worked very hard and also had a limited amount of food, our spirits were relatively good because of the radio reception we had, and we saw that the end of the war is near. When the Russians were as close so that we could hear the cannons, our guards as well as we decided to move further west, and our guards put us into a heavily wired prison camp, and we thought we were caught in a bad position. We tested the wires and the barbed fences and found out they were not electrified, so we slept the night there and then went as a group further west. By that time we walked through forests and heavy snow, and it was physically very draining after the hard work at the camp to keep on marching through the snow.
And anyway, I went onto a freight car and I collapsed. For 3 days I was on the freight car and I don't know anything what happened there. Anyway, it wound up to be to go to Vienna, around Czechoslovakia. When the Russians came again, so we all found a bicycle each, 4 bicycles, and a little cart about that size for all our things on top there, including a typewriter. We needed a typewriter, obviously we needed a typewriter. And with the typewriter, we got some paper, because it was still Nazi time, you see. So we always typed a letter that we were on our way on an important mission, and we needed food stamps. So we went to all those village burgermeisters or mayors, and we got food stamps, and then we could eat. Right? And when we went as far as Kaufbeuren im Allgäu, and that's where we knew the Americans would come.
More than colleagues, Zemlinsky and Schoenberg were actually brothers-in-law. Schoenberg was married to Zemlinsky's sister. What inspired me to create this project, this gathering of materials and experiences to explore this issue of identity and conversion, comes from a personal story, my family history, and my own story. I hope to inspire my audience to think of these things for themselves in their own families, in their own interior lives. What does it mean to be who we are? How can we see each other in a more compassionate light and not look for binding definitions of each other, but rather opening up and seeing that we're many combinations of many things. That gives us a lot of freedom to explore ourselves and to have greater and deeper understanding for other people. Ultimately, I want to erase lines that divide us and inspire people to feel at peace within ourselves and with each other. I hope some of you have questions. Yes. Which picture? Yes, yeah. Yeah, I had my hair blown out, so it's less curly. Yes, yeah, and my father and my godmother, and certainly about the composers as well. I think there's a little bit of a feedback in this. Any other questions? Yes.
I was curious about the messenger that you had discovered about yourself, and are there others besides you that you know? Other people exploring and reverting back to the Jewish faith?
Oh, I mean, I think that people convert all the time, sure. I don't know if it's necessarily from this family history. I mean, the converts that I know, most of them don't actually have a Jewish connection in their family.
Okay, I just wondered if others beside you have discovered this background of.
I'm sure it happens all the time. I mean, you know, I don't know if people go to such lengths. I tend to be very thorough, as you could see, and really, I don't leave any rocks unturned. I want to know everything, and actually, what I've discovered in this process is that it's kind of impossible to, because, for example, my father, now I'm not sure that it's on, but anyway, can you all hear me? Yeah, okay, fine, great. I don't know. I can't give you a clear-cut answer as to which forced labor camp my father was in, because he said Ostlinde. I can't find that on the map. My uncle said that my father was in Gross Rosen, which was a satellite camp of Auschwitz. Then I had International Tracing Services try and find my father's path or experiences, or where he was and at what time, and that's all connected with the Red Cross, and they have a lot of files, and they didn't find him at all. And I said, how can that be? And they said, well, documents were destroyed. And then in terms of which camp was he in, well, they moved from camp to camp at times, so I'll always have that question mark, because similar to many children of survivors, it's painful. My father has passed, and there's a reticence, especially with a survivor who does not want to talk about things and is not particularly communicative about the whole experience. It feels painful to bring it up, because I didn't want to, in a sense, cause him to feel any sadness. I mean, he came to this United States really with, he landed here running, making a success out of himself and having, family, and and he was always into whatever the next thing was, whatever his next project was. So, to then say, so Dad, now I want to bring up your past, and it's painful, and because I'm curious, it's very difficult conversations to have. So there's, some things are known and some things aren't. I know that he wouldn't eat beets because that's all they ate during the war. So, I want more information, but I can't. So I read books. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks. Yes.
How would you say your life became different when you became Jewish as opposed to racist?
Right. Well, it's a kind of, there are a few levels to that, because I became Jewish in my 20s. So, there's the life as an adult, and then life living as a child and living in one's family's home. And so I feel at home. Something that I quote myself a lot on is, as a musician, I'm very sensitive to sound. And the sound of Beethoven and the sound of Hebrew lie equally in my heart. So, and it feels natural to me. It feels, it's theologically, how much choice do children have in the faith that they're brought up in? So I don't know that I was ever, I went through the paces, just like I went to school, I went to Sunday school, not because I got up that morning and said, let's go. I was, that's what we did. We celebrated Christmas, and I'm one of 5 siblings, and so 2 out of the 5 of us are Jewish. My brother went through a conservative conversion, so in a sense we've covered all the bases. I didn't ever, Christmas was, about getting presents, so not so theologically based. And my father would say, anytime, so in terms of me personally, I don't miss anything, because I don't know that what was it about for me? Candy and gifts. Well, we went to church. But I don't know that I was. I was in high school. I was in Bible study for a little bit, but it didn't take. It just didn't take. So, and I feel at home now. I want to share that my father was not happy with my choices, and you'll understand why, because he thought that the whole thing could happen again. And so it was not his disagreement with me was not theological at all. He said he felt that all religions were political, and coming from his experience, it makes sense. I would anytime I had a conversation with him, he would say, it's somewhere, not even about this, like, where are we going for dinner? What time do we need to meet at the play? Any kind of conversation that I had with him in my 20s and going forward, he would say, somewhere I would wait for the shoe to drop in the conversation where it would go to, don't be Jewish. And I argued with him. I said, what's the difference to you if I go to a place on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning? What's the difference to you? Okay, well then, don't be on any list. So you understand that. But absolutely. No, not at all, not at all. And I argued with him. I said, I grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey. What kind of harm could ever come to me? I've never known any fear or danger. And he really felt that the whole thing could happen again. I would say that I argued with him also. I said, okay, so fine. Do you believe that, and this is no offense to anyone here sitting here. I said, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and your Savior? No. Do you believe in God? Yes. I said, okay, fine. There's my answer. So I would really say that his family was his religion. He didn't go to church. He would show up maybe on Christmas Eve or any time that my mother felt it was kind of important. She goes to church every Sunday. She's a believing Christian. When I converted, she was concerned for my soul post-mortem. And now, she's attended my nephew's bris, and, and she's, knows when she's okay with it now. She knows when Passover is. She knows when Hanukkah is. My youngest brother now has 2 very young children and a 3rd on the way. And she gets it that we're living Jewishly. And so she's a very, very open-minded person, especially for her generation. So, actually, post-Pittsburgh, I haven't gone to shul. I'm afraid. Englewood, yeah. There's an armed guard in shul. There's an armed guard. That's not normal. It's not normal. It's not normal. No. So what my anxiety is about, because in Germany there were all these sorts of, especially with German Jews, feeling so comfortable in their own skin in Germany, so assimilated, so German first, Jewish second, and, having fought in the First World War, they really felt that they owned, and they would make these sorts of, yes, my godmother says, things went from worse to worse, right? So, okay, so fine. One day there's a law that you have to turn your radio in. So you go, you take your radio, and the next day you go back to work again. You say, oh, okay, so fine. These crazies are in power. Sooner or later, we're the place where medical students all around the world come to. We're the highest culture. How could things go wrong? So they're a little wrong. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get particularly political right now, but you know, we have a lot of anxiety in our political life now, and so we say, okay, fine. You know, we have elections, and sooner or later, you know, things will calm down. Or there are hate crimes, and we say, okay, well, now we've sort of fixed it with, you know, law and order, and we have, and then something different happens, and you know, we're chasing it around in our heads, and we're trying. I mean, I think it's a psychological phenomenon to somehow create some kind of status quo in our minds, and to be able to kind of make rationalizations so that we can have some kind of peace of mind and function. You know, but mass shootings, I don't know what to say. So, and I don't know what to do either. I feel powerless. So this is, you know, so here we are in a room sitting together, you know, learning new information, speaking about it. We then go to our friends. We're in a conversation with somebody at dinner. We speak about it some more. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't want to own a gun. You know, I really don't. Right. And then also I think, well, so, you know, the Jews are always the canary in the coal mine, right? It's not just about us. It's about this, the health of the society. And I mean, my husband will argue with me. He's of Syrian background, so he's, you know, without the Ashkenazi, like, anxieties. He is very comfortable in his own skin. He likes to eat. You know, that's about it for Syrians. They like family and eating. So, right? So they're not worried about every tiny little thing so much. No, I hear you. But he'll argue that you can't compare that time to this time because it's not 1930. And it's sort of like a... it's not right to take that and then put it, make an imprint of it on today, because our government, unlike the Nazi government, our government is not behind these acts of violence. But there's a certain rhetoric that then brings these people out. So anyway, sorry. Yes.
Just wondering, your godmother being also a Micheliner,
Yes.
the relationship between your father and your godmother, was that deliberately sought out? Is there some connection between them both being Micheliner?
Is there some connection? They were very good friends in Breslau. Her brother, who was killed in Auschwitz, was my father's best friend. And her father was the headmaster of this school that my father attended. So they were very close. The reason we ended up living in Tenafly is because my godmother and my godfather lived there. And so my father thought, well, if the Steinfelds are there, we'll move there. So, so yes. You know, there's no rule around how things were. You know, some days it was this way, some days it was that way. There are no hard and fast ways of explaining how things happened. Really, and I think that's why, you know, some people were able to survive just sort of like on a lucky situation where the guy just didn't do what he was supposed to do. I mean, just, you know, it's a hard period to wrap one's mind around. Part of me is, you know, you saw all the books that I've read, and it's just trying more and more and more to understand it. And the more I read, the kind of less I understand, and it's just so vast. And then from location to location, it's not really possible to say blanket statements about things, except for the fact that we do know, we have the numbers of how many people were killed. I mean, for example, in my father's own family, his aunt and uncle were killed in Auschwitz on his mother's side. His cousin on his father's side was in the Wehrmacht and killed on the Eastern Front, you know, because he was a German soldier. So my message is war's not a good idea, right? That's what it boils down to. No, so I think somebody else had something to say. No? Any comments? No? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.